Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we spotlight powerful voices and bold ideas shaping the world of books, culture, and thought. In today's episode, we're joined by Brian Oglesby, the author of Progressives, Leftists, and Black America: How the Leftists' Progressive Policies and Causes Have Been Bad for Black America. This book explores how progressive and liberal policies over the past 50 years have negatively impacted the African American community, contrasting that with earlier periods when some progressive causes may have been more beneficial. Brian offers a provocative analysis of what might have been different had conservative, right-leaning influences played a larger role in shaping those decades. Let's dive into the conversation. Brian, glad to see you and talk to you.
Yes, glad to be with you and talk to you. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be on your show.
And the feeling is mutual. It's an honor to have you. And so jumping right in, what's one truth about the relationship between progressivism and Black America that rarely makes it into mainstream conversations?
The progressives, they're leading America in a path that we don't really want to go in. You see, the progressives are on the left-leaning end of the spectrum, and since they're on the left, they are more likely to be socialist or Marxist. And years ago, when before the Civil Rights Movement and before the Civil War, some of the counterculture liberal movement that was around then, I think was connected to this progressive movement we have now. That some things actually were better for us because some of those people were abolitionists. They were really abolitionists. They really were liberals. Back then, they were liberal, but now they're not liberal anymore. These progressives now, they're far left leaning, they're radically left, and they don't really like it. Our free market economy with capitalism, our constitutional republic, they're not really there anymore now. Now they're more of they've changed. Now they are pro LGBTQAI, a lot of them are, and now they're for the radical feminist movement. And none of those movements are good for Black people now. So they've changed their outlook. They went from being liberal thinkers, outside the box thinkers, to really radical toward one cause, and they're not good for Black Americans anymore. Now conservatives have a better plan. Now Black Americans can really enjoy living in a country that has a free market economy with capitalism and a constitutional republic without any restraints like the Jim Crow laws the South had and the sundown towns that they had and all the ordinances that big cities had that stated that Black people can live in this neighborhood but not that one. You can go to school here but not there. And some of the big northern cities had white only and colored only sections too, which was really, it kept Black people restrained, to certain things and areas. But those same conservatives now are different. They're not like that anymore. They're just trying to preserve the basics, the free market, the capitalism, the constitutional republic that Black Americans can enjoy now as first-class citizens of the country. But progressives, they're going to destroy the country and make it somewhere else. And you could make it something else, and you could be a racist progressive too, and a racist liberal too.
Okay, well, it's
Yeah.
good that we're being educated on this to get your perspective. And I love you talking about the present and the past, right? There's things going on now, but we can get the understanding by revisiting history. And speaking of that, if you could hit pause and rewrite one pivotal political movement in Black American history, where would you start and what would you change?
I think I'd go all the way back to, there was a debate between two really big icons of leadership in the Black community. And they were these big, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. They had a debate in 1900, and it was called the Atlanta Compromise in the South. And Booker T. His point that he was trying to make was black people should integrate with whites, and we should join white society, their clubs, their hospitals, their universities, their in everything, all their cultural and social institutions. Join them. Just leap in and be a part of society, and prove that you can do that you are worth accepting into society. And that wasn't a bad idea. Actually, that if it worked, that was a good idea. It was really good. Now, Booker T. Washington had another idea. His was no, black people shouldn't try and integrate with whites. At this point, they should cast their buckets down where they are, and they should form strong black communities of their own and not try and integrate with whites. But he spearheaded the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and this was like late 1800s, maybe late 1870s, until the business district was burned to the ground in 1921 by some racist. There were Klansmen and some other groups of people that were racist. It was burned to the ground. But before it was burned to the ground, the blacks generated a lot of wealth. Certain ones did, and they were providing jobs and opportunity for them that you can't get anywhere else. And Booker T. Washington, what he did was he went to Tuskegee, Alabama, and he started the Tuskegee Institute. It was a training institute where black people could get training in trades, and they could learn trades that would make them useful in society. And so some of them would go to those places like Tulsa and places all over the country and use the trades if they wanted to. But in Tulsa, it was a really unique setup because you had all these black businesses, and he organized all the black businesses and organized the Negro Business League. So you had black businesses that were buying and selling from each other, and black people were supporting them, and the black dollar was changing hands between 36 and 100 times before it left the black community, and some really good things were happening for the black community back then. So, but the reason why they didn't was they haven't happened now is because W.E.B. Du Bois won the debate. And I think that changed the precedence for black people trying to integrate into society and become a part of society versus having your own community and developing some wealth and just partially integrating in society, but have these places here where you have a community and you can benefit from those communities, those ethnic communities as an ethnic background. Because in the United States, a lot of the other ethnic backgrounds did it too, but they didn't need to after a while because they were acceptable as full-fledged Americans. You see what I mean? But black people really weren't. So I wish Booker T. Washington had won that debate. It would have set a different precedence.
Would have completely changed the historical past.
Yeah. And things, I think, would have come out different if he had won that debate.
Yes. Well, speaking of that, do you think long-term political loyalty among black voters has led to some missed opportunities or leverage for reform?
Yeah, because what happened was black people, right after the Civil War, with the 15th Amendment, black people could vote. They could vote back then, but they rarely ever did because they were ran away from the voting polls in the South by the Klan. They used to run them away from the polls. And up north in the Midwest, they put the polls in areas where if you were black, you might not want to go to those places because you wouldn't be treated very nicely. Or they had all these rules where you had to be able to name a certain amount of senators in the White House, maybe. They had some crazy rules that you had to, and nobody could answer those questions. And so black people, but whites, they didn't hold whites accountable to them. They didn't ask whites those questions, but they had asked black people. If they did ask whites, they'd give them the answers. But black people didn't know back then. They rarely ever voted. But when the civil rights movement came in the 60s, and Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael and all those other radicals were trying to encourage black people to vote, they registered them for the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party, they've never really been, I'll just be honest with you, they've never been good to black people. They've never been nice to black people. The Republicans have always been better. And a lot of black people can't see that. So I think if black people change their voting preferences more to conservative and Republican, and I'm not saying all Republicans are good, because some Republicans are just career politicians too, and they're going to follow a lead. And all Democrats aren't that bad either. But I think if we had went more the Republican route with conservative ideas behind why politicians should support an issue, I think we would have had some better outcomes with that. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, I'm enjoying the education. Like you have all these amazing insights I haven't heard so far. And speaking of that, it's always great to learn and have our minds change. So as far as you and your journey, Mr. Brian, was there a moment or a conversation or a piece of writing that fundamentally changed your worldview and changed your political path?
I guess the best way I could answer that is I used to vote. When I voted, I went to the polls and I voted a straight Democrat ticket because I thought the Democrats were better for the black community. But now, slowly, I learned some different things about the Democrat Party, and I slowly started to change about them. So, and as I was putting this book together, I learned some different things, even just putting the book together. And I had to change some things. So not one thing really made me change, but I think it was a number of things over time that made me change, I think.
Okay, and I'm curious to dig a little deeper into that and find out what changed with you. So since stepping away from the progressive frameworks, how has your understanding of solidarity and community shifted?
One way that it's changed is that you need to have an economy in your community. Because, I went to Chicago. I used to go there every summer. I used to go to Chicago every summer. And the last time I went, I remember I went at one time in 96. My cousin was graduating from the police academy. And so I went back again in 2014 for a workshop in Schaumburg, Illinois. And I wanted to see what all those places on the lakefront looked like and what Lakeshore Drive looked like again in Michigan Avenue and all those shops and those places in the Loop. They were really fun places to go to in Chicago. So I went in that direction and I drove through the Hispanic community. I drove through the little village neighborhood that the Hispanics have. And it really impressed me. If I saw something that I saw their shops and their restaurants, the bodega, the shop, and I saw their ethnic restaurants, and I saw a lot of their businesses, like maybe everything, like maybe like a little hardware store over here, and maybe a Western Union over here where you can mail money back to another country. And maybe over here you saw a clinic, and maybe over here a dental office, and maybe a car lot over here, and maybe another restaurant over here, and maybe a bank and a savings and loan over here. And all of them had Mexican, Hispanic names. They were Spanish last names. And then you roll your window down and you hear the mariachi music. And then you see some of the buildings have these bright colored murals on them. And they really look like something out of Mexico City. I mean, it was really, but in a community has to have an economy like that. See, but you never see anything like that in the black community in the United States, because we tried to completely integrate with whites, and so it didn't work for us. Now, Hispanics, they've integrated, but to a greater or lesser extent, but they integrated just enough to get the advantages of living in an integrated society. Like, for example, some career fields that black people might not have been able to have if they just had like a pharmaceutical sales rep. A black person may not have had a pharmaceutical company, but if you work, it's just as an example, but if there was enough integration to where you could work in a company, in a pharmaceutical company, you could get a job like that. Or maybe a certain type of engineering, or maybe an astronaut, or maybe an airline pilot. The black community may not have had needed an airline pilot for anybody anywhere. And so the Hispanics, they kept these communities where you could have a lot of opportunity. And those communities, they really give you a community, some say so in the politics and the social direction of a big city, and they produce a tax base for that city that's really good for it. And I think that's what needs to happen in the black community. First, you need to get that, and then you can go to law enforcement and get things changed, and then you can buy radio and TV stations, and then you can really live as a full-fledged member of a free society, you know, and that's what didn't happen for the black community. And I wish that had happened, but it didn't.
Hmm. Well, this is a very nuanced conversation, right? There, like, it's not
Yeah.
one extreme or the other. It seems like this
Mm-hmm.
idea of integration, but you don't maybe want to do too much or not enough. And there's all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
other factors like getting the economy going. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's great to get some of your ideas and then jump into a book such as yours, which you already mentioned, but it's called Progressives, Leftists, and Black America: How the
Mm-hmm.
Leftist Progressive Policies and Causes Have Been Bad for Black America. And so since you've put out this book, since you've released the book, have any recent developments confirmed your ideas or pushed you to rethink any of these positions?
Um, to rethinking, you know what I think what I've seen so far has basically confirmed what I've been saying all along, what I've been thinking all along. Yeah, I think it has. Because now what's happened is in the United States, we've had a lot of migrants to come across the southern border. Now, some came across the northern border, but the northern border didn't get a lot of attention. The southern border got more, and those people are going to go to communities where there are people like them, and they're going to have communities. They're going to build those communities, and they're going to be stronger. The black community is dependent on other groups of people and the government outside of their community. You see, to provide jobs and opportunity for them. The other immigrant groups, they're not going to be as dependent. As long as we can keep this free market with capitalism and the constitutional republic going, then they should be okay. But yeah, that's what I think. If we go to socialism or something, everybody's going to be dependent on the government. And you could be a racist socialist too. You could exclude certain ethnic backgrounds too as a socialist. So I think it's better that I think I've seen the effects of what I've always thought continue to happen now.
Okay. Well, you mentioned these ideas about working together, right, and the community.
Right.
And what that makes you
Mm-hmm.
think about is the next generation and educating the young kids that way, because they're the ones
Mm-hmm.
that are going to make these changes and build things. And so
Mm-hmm.
we don't have a lot of time left in the show, but we have a lot of questions to ask. So it's almost like lightning round time here, where the
Yeah.
next thing I'm asking you is, what role should Black scholars and thought leaders play in calling out ineffective or harmful policies, regardless of political affiliation?
A lot. They can play a lot. But see, a lot of the politicians in the black community, they're in line either directly or indirectly, they're bought out by progressives and the left. And so they're not going to call out anything that progressives and the left see as right when it's really wrong. That's what I think about that. We have to change them about that. And so you're going to have to show them a lot of things that are good about what conservatives are representing and the right.
Okay.
And so you can do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So speaking of
Yeah.
changing minds, do you believe that there's space in today's culture for this honest dissent from progressive orthodoxy, or do you think it's still too risky to challenge the status quo?
You know what? It depends on what group of people you're speaking with. Because see, you can meet some people on the street, or some people at work, or some people that you know in your neighborhood, and you don't know how progressive those people feel, how they feel about progressive issues, how they feel about the left or the right, and it's really hard to tell right now. And sometimes it's like you're walking on eggshells talking to certain people. So it really depends on what group you're with, what group of people you're with. And this thing is really dividing American society, but it really depends now. But I think it's still possible.
Okay. And it's good that it is possible, and it's good that
Mm-hmm,
we're learning some of these things, right? And
mm-hmm,
figuring out some new approaches. And so when we
mm-hmm.
do have that conversation in whatever context, how can we have these honest discussions about these issues like education, family, and work ethic without it being dismissed as respectability politics?
It's kind of hard to do that. It depends on where the other person's um, compass of what's right and wrong is. It just depends on some people are really liberal. I mean, they're really progressive. And some of them are really very pro LGBTQAI plus and things like that. They're really pro the Democrat Party. They're really pro Hamas and anti Israel. And so if you come to them and you talk to them about the situation in Israel with Hamas, and you say you support Israel and they support Hamas, because they're from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free people, you're going to offend them. And so it's hard to have a conversation with people like that. So we got to change some mentalities and some beliefs by presenting to people the truth all the time. And then you can't always change people because they're going to insist on being the same the way they were before. But you can change some people slowly. If you talk to them about the Republican Party and about the changes that would happen if everything went farther to the right, some of the positives of it, you can.
Okay, and it would be great to explore some of that about how the future might look. And so, as in the spirit of building forward, imagine you're helping shape a political framework for the next generation. What principles do you think must be non-negotiable?
Okay, some non-negotiable principles is you have to have a community where you have to have, if you're going to have communities where these ethnic communities where people can benefit because of the ethnic background, we have to have places. Everywhere else in society has to be places where everybody can work together. Because an example of that is the military. Everybody benefits from having a strong military. So everybody, regardless of race or ethnic background, has got to work together in government positions. Everybody benefits from government. We all have to work together regardless of race or ethnic background and make the government work. And there are some other things. There are some private businesses, private corporations, large corporations that produce products and services that everybody uses. So we're going to have to work together in those circles, regardless of race and ethnic background, and make everything work. with total respect for everybody's differences. We can have a society like that, or we can have one where everybody is an American and all the ethnic communities are gone, and it doesn't make a difference what anyone is. So we got to get that established first. Which direction are we going to go? And I think we can go either way. I'm fine, but I wish we could go with where there was no difference in ethnic background or race. We got to get some of those things straightened out first, and then we can drive in a really clear direction. Because we have divisions now, and some of them are put here honestly by progressives.
Okay. So you're saying that we need to work together and respect the differences. And in spirit of that, a lot of our news and ideas comes from social media and from television and, media and all that sort of stuff. So in the spirit of mindset, media, and messaging, like what would need to shift in those areas? Mindset, media, and messaging for more Black Americans to embrace political independence.
We have a lot of we have a lot of cancel culture in the media now. It's really bad. And so the media is really hard. Media is really hard now to use but there's some places in the media like Hollywood. They could do a lot. They could put some movies on TV, or they could change some of the sitcoms and some of the other movies we see on TV and make them different. But they're not going to do that. I don't ever see them doing that. And we need some independent artists to go independent and come with some ideas and put them on Facebook and Instagram and all the other social media outlets and have people subscribe to them. And you can have some underground movements going that can really change people. Like there's some rappers that rap about conservative ideas and they like what they do. And if they can change people as independent artists, then that's good, because some actors and actresses have left Hollywood and they become independent. And if they can change people, that would be really good. So get some independent actors on board to change things.
Get those independent actors on board to change things. And it seems like this is all leading to this idea of empowerment, which is like a wonderful topic to think and pontificate about, isn't it? So when you envision this term empowerment in a practical sense, what does empowerment look like in our neighborhoods or schools and our businesses?
Well, I think for the Black community, what's going to have to happen is we need to have a setup like the Hispanics have in the little village community, that they had more so along the lines of that. And I think that would be better. That would really empower the Black community more if we had a setup like that. Now, for the rest of the country to empower us as a nation, what we need to do is, I think conservatives really have a better picture for that. I think they really have a better plan for it. We should keep our capitalism, but just reform it, because you could be a terrible capitalist, a greedy capitalist, and you could make some terrible things happen for people out of your greed. I think we need to keep the society that we have, capitalism, the constitutional republic, the free market, and our Judeo-Christian heritage, because there's some good things in the Bible that are very good principles as a base from which you can go to get what's morally right. I think just keep the system that we had, the ideas, but reform them.
All right.
But
don't
people
throw.
in, and tell people, especially capitalism, reform it and get people to change back to some of those old values again, because some of them were really good ones to have.
Yeah, reform it and pick back up what we lost, but we don't have to throw it all out and start again. Just do some reshaping.
Yeah, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. I was thinking that exact phrase just now.
Yeah. You don't want
Well,
to do that.
Well, great. Well, you're giving us a good idea about what's in this book, which once again is called Progressives, Leftists, and Black America. And it seems like we keep revisiting this idea of the young kids, right? And what they need to
Mhm.
know to understand and learn from history. And so we're in the final few minutes of our conversation. So right now it's in the home stretch and we're talking about this exciting topic of culture, youth, and influence. And so now that we're in this kind of final part of our conversation, how can we better connect with young Black thinkers who feel aligned with progressive ideals, but maybe they're open to reevaluating them?
We need to tell them some truths about progressives and how Black people benefited from, um, I would say, counterculture liberals. And I think it was really a part of what became the progressive movement now, and let them know that, well, those people didn't really have our best interests, they had their interests, and show them why. Because I think one example of where they didn't really have our best interests was Woodrow Wilson. He was a progressive era president for the United States, and but he was a white Southerner. And so when he got in office, he started to segregate federal facilities, and he fired a lot of his black workforce, and he had separate waiting rooms and restrooms for black people and white people, and he used the N word frequently, and he was a progressive. And Teddy Roosevelt was one too, and he believed that he invited Booker T. Washington to the White House, but he was still a eugenicist. And there's certain groups of people undesirable, like Margaret Sanger, that made the abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood. So progressives haven't always been on our side. So consider what conservatives have to offer as something that's better, because they were never really our friends to begin with, and they still aren't now. So look at what conservatives are talking about now. Some really good things about preserving our free market, our capitalism, our constitution, and show them the really good points behind that. Yeah.
Very nice. Pay attention, see what change is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and see what
Mm-hmm.
interests you and what you can latch onto. So, do you sense any ideological shift in these cultural spaces in music, film, social media? Do you sense any shift that hints at a broader political awakening?
Like I said, the independent artists, like the rappers that are rapping about conservative things, and they're better things to go. And some of the artists, the actors and actresses in Hollywood that broke away from Hollywood, and they're doing some independent little things, and those are really good. I see some positive things happening from just them. Because now we have Facebook and we have YouTube and we have some alternative TV stations on cable TV, and you can watch some of their skits, their programs. And so you can't stop people from going to those places to watch. And you can't stop people from telling others about them either. So I think slowly, as people get the message that this progressive movement isn't working, I think they're going to start to change. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, it's time to start the
Hmm.
change, especially with those young people who will be around a lot longer than you
Well,
and me,
yeah.
and they'll make all
Hmm.
kinds of change, and they've come up in a
Exactly.
completely different world. And so, what advice would you offer one of those young people who is perhaps wrestling with political frustration or apathy in today's climate?
You know, there's a lot of places you could start with that one, but they're wrestling with one thing they have to be. I think is just be bold and just say that if you think that conservatism is better, then stand for it and tell them why you think it is. And if you think it's better to have a Judeo Christian viewpoint about things versus ones that progressives have, then, and the left, then tell them why you think they need to. And the kids, And the youth can really learn a lot from some of the artists and some of the schools that have went independent and have taught some different things. So the kids, the youth, we have to teach them some different things in society, get them into some different media besides some of the mainstream media and some of the alternative media on TV. Turn some of that on for them to listen to this more and look at this more wholesome and that's more conservative. And you can change the kids a lot because they're very malleable and very changeable at a certain age, especially when they're young, like less than about 10 years old. You can really change them. Because I think I heard something that said by the time you get 13, your worldview is basically shaped. It can be changed a little after 13, but it's basically shaped by 13. So get the kids young and educate them differently. And I think you can change things.
I think so too. And stand behind your values and your principles, right? Fight
Mm-hmm.
for what your ideas and what you believe in and what you want the future
Mm-hmm.
to be. Make your case to the kids, and that way then they will fight for what it is they want. And these are some incredible ideas here today, Mr. Brian. The
Sure.
book is
Mm-hmm.
called Progressives, Leftists, and Black America: How the Leftist Progressive Policies and Causes Have Been Bad for Black America. And that wraps up today's episode of the BrightWord Books Podcast. We want to make a sincere thank you to Mr. Brian Oglesby for sharing his perspective and challenging us to think more critically about the policies, ideologies, and historical patterns shaping Black America today. And whether you agreed, disagreed, or found yourself asking new questions, that's what this space is all about, which is honest dialogue, bold thought, and pushing beyond the surface. And if you found this episode meaningful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with others who value deep, thought-provoking conversations. And thanks for listening. Until next time, keep reading with purpose and thinking with clarity.